嗰個 Vincent， 嗰個明眼哥有玩啊！
哦，你幾多歲啊？
嚇？佢8歲，佢8歲。
你咧
？8歲。
你又8歲啊？你幾多歲啊？
佢5歲嚇，你
5歲係嘛？5歲啊？你哪屆啊？哦。
同個邊袋啦，個邊袋開條先啲大講嚟先啦。哎，啲大嗰時喺係啊，喺兩邊啦咯，係咯。哎，幾開條個兩邊啦。個開要開停住，開停。係啊，兩個見都話換得兩件咯，翻嚟幾街咁流啊。一定人買。哎呀，出我咯，係。佢攞啦，啊個。
英文啊？
嘛？
哦，我翻去講嘅。
講佢先。
你有冇喺電梯度出邊啊？
佢之前間冇搬呢個發期。
哦，發期。
買咩話？
For many Canadians, a trip to China conjures up images of the exotic. But as a Chinese Canadian, on my first trip back to my village, going to China has a very special meaning. This is Fengdan Village, Toisan County, 2 hours by car southwest of Canton. Everyone here speaks my dialect. It sounds like the Chinatown of my childhood back in Montreal. My second sister, who lives in Edmonton, is here with me.
飛機個上下咯，拿上嚟改嘛？
拿上改啊？
唔係咯，拿上嚟改。
沒人做嘛？
沒事啦，我唔俾退啦，來面嚟，喺嘅條就話個就啲落去啦，快啲湊翻你啦，即係我哋咪諗多嚟佔唔曉話呀。
Our family house was built in 1931 with money my father sent from Canada. I was born in this house during my father's last trip back to China in 1948. My mother's niece and her family still live here. They look after the family altar to my grandparents. These last few years, I felt a yearning to return to my village. When my father died in 1982, I felt I had lost my connection to the past, to my roots. Shortly after his death, I got involved in a campaign to redress the decades of suffering the Canadian government inflicted on Chinese immigrants and their families. This involvement gave me a strong impetus to start this journey to find my father's history. I regret, when my father was still alive, we never talked about the past. I'm cherishing every moment here, standing on the same soil that my father and my ancestors have stood on for thousands of years. This is where we all started. I've been a Canadian almost all my life. By coming here, I found a part of me that seems to have been missing for so long, that bond to my ancestry. I have a feeling of sadness as I say goodbye to family and village cousins. Also a feeling of displacement. I know that I don't belong here anymore. My life is in Canada. It's back there that I will find my father's story. It's also the story of thousands of Chinese Canadians who lived through the head tax and exclusion years. My personal journey to find meaning to that past is deeply rooted in the Chinese Canadian experience. 150 years ago, Chinese peasants began leaving this area. Like immigrants from around the world, they sought a better life for themselves and their families in a place called Gold Mountain. My grandfather and my father were among those early pioneers. At the beginning of this century, my grandfather arrived in Vancouver. He walked the same beach, digging for crabs to eat. A young man in his 20s, he came to seek his fortune in Gold Mountain. My father joined him in 1921. They both paid a $500 head tax. And for the next 30 years, they would embark on a bittersweet journey that was uniquely Canadian. My name is William Deer, De Geng Wei in Chinese. I consider myself a third-generation Chinese Canadian. For 3 decades, the Chinese Exclusion Act separated my family. The Canadian government refused my father and grandfather the right to bring their wives and children here. I want to come to terms with the effects of that separation on myself and my family. I want to uncover those lost years. How did my father feel being away from his wife and children for so long? My family gets together often in my brother's house in Montreal. Family life is much easier now. But during the period of exclusion, my mother was left in the village in China to look after the family home and to raise the children. She relied on whatever money father could send back. Her situation was typical of the Gold Mountain widows. Like myself, my sisters and my brother were born in China during my father's few visits home.
咁咪見到你一個個要爸爸屋企，我冇爸爸屋企都唔知叫我咯，咁咪見住阿媽咪咯，見住媽咪屋企啊咪阿媽咪另外咪將嗌咯。
咪佢有冇講你話阿爸爸近奶叫喺度啊？
我爸爸近奶咪到曬魚啊，向老闆曬魚啊，我見到眼翻嚟叫讓我啊我咯。
咪你冇諗叫我做咩阿爸爸望你個好大奶啊？
佢冇諗我，叫時冇諗我，唔識嚟諗我，因為叫時中國咧，可能係出洋波吃嘅，冇乜咧嘛，向咧顧前咧當都嗌個過來啊，佢聽影嘅，個係我鄉下嘅。
年吃飯嘅時候咧，假如話爸爸出邊話有一份飯係拜都幫擺，因為爸爸啊我咯。
These are just 2 of some 2,600 Chinese Canadians alive today who paid the infamous Chinese head tax. There were 81,000 in all. Today, they want their money back, calling it a tax refund.
The way today's Chinese Canadians tell it, it was shortly after the last spike was driven in 1885, that the Canadian government imposed a head tax on all Chinese immigrants entering this country. The only country to do so, the only immigrants affected. In 1923, it was abolished, but replaced by the Chinese Immigration Act of 1923. This prohibited all Chinese from entering the country. All this was abolished some years later in 1947.
But why the Chinese?
I mean, the explanation was in fact racist, saying that the Chinese are heathens, they're dirty, we do not want to be contaminated by Asians in Canada. That's the pure logic to these laws.
My pleasure at being relieved of the score.
We want to prevent the influx of Mongolians. We want to be here ourselves. We do not want others.
One would dread the pouring in of a horde of celestials from the practically illimitable fountain of 400 million in China.
Indeed, the more I know of the Chinese character, the more I am inclined to the opinion that we are justified in excluding them from this country.
Oh, great. There are more than 81,000 names in these registration books of Chinese immigration. Almost all of them are male. One size fits all. This is where I discovered that my grandfather arrived in 1909. As for my father's entry, serial number 93744. So I guess if I go through, looking at the serial numbers, it's probably towards the back. So let me see now. 937, 933. Okay, yeah, it should be here. 93744. Okay, this is it. It's right here.
Oh, good.
Yeah, the CI-36. He paid a $500 head tax here. Male, 14, he was 14 when he came. From then, schoolboy, that was his listed occupation. I didn't know it was this tall, 5'7.5".
So it gives more details.
Yeah, well, it gives, you know, scars on his forefinger. It's quite interesting. They must have checked him over. Now, he was registered on June 9th, but he landed on May 16th. So that means he must have spent about two weeks in the detention center.
Oh, that's quite a while.
Yeah.
So that's when they were investigating him, finding out where all his scars were.
That's it. I guess they checked through his whole body for scars. My father's early days in Canada remain a mystery. My family cannot give me many details about his life during the exclusion years. There's a huge gap in our family history during that time. I decided to go back to Chinatown to find some of the old-timers who may have known my father, hoping they might be able to give me a glimpse of what life was like back then. James Wing is one of the few surviving head taxpayers in Montreal.
That's right. And could you tell me, when did you first meet my father and my grandfather?
Well, I met your father and grandfather from the very day I arrived at the city. So that my father and your grandfather are belonging to the same Christian association, Chinese YMCI.
Where was that at that time?
That the Chinese YMCI is over up there, in the middle of this block, just opposite Giver Rose building.
Right.
所以人就話其實佢生活冇家庭咧，佢哋冇乜地方去，所以佢哋談論得出嚟㗎，係相見傾談，我哋喺陳民主政府度咧，我哋訂咗好中國嘅報紙啊。
I met James through our mutual involvement in the redress campaign for the Head Tax and Exclusion Act. He was among the last to arrive in Canada in 1923. He was only 10. Today, his memories of my father and grandfather are sketchy, but James has his own story to tell.
一民入港後，打起個伏包，誰知歡喜反為仇，歸失受困更逐流，無能教，殘酷氣難烤，缺食不堪嚴濟處，英雄到此也垂頭。
When I got to Vancouver, I was sent straight to a building, about 4-story high, quite sized building, and I was put in one flat and a big room. And I noticed in that room there were about 20 or 30 teenager Chinese, all boys, you know, they do stay no girls. And there are a lot of bunker beds around there, but some beds have a mattress, some have no mattress, the spring, you know. So it happened that my friend had a cotton comforter, and I had a woolen blanket. So we both shared the bed, and we did, otherwise it would be very, very hard for us, because in Vancouver in August, the night was cold, you know, but this way we can stand it within suffer. And I was kept there 2 weeks. We call it like a concentration camp feeling, you know. We had no way to avoid it, so we endured. He had to pay that $100 before they released me, one thing. And I later learned that my father had to pay another $50 to the official there. You know. I later learned, I said, those people did not pay the money to the official. They could be kept there for a month or 3 weeks. But if those people gave them $100, they keep him there just for 1 week. And my father paid him $50, so I was kept for 2 weeks.
My father was locked up in this place for 3 weeks. All Chinese entering Canada in those days had a similar experience.
My father was a stranger, almost a total stranger to me. And then he's not used to kids, and I didn't know how to call him that. All my life, I never called him, say, father or papa. I never. Even when I was growing up, and then maybe make him very disappointed, but I love him. And he, maybe inside him, but he never said it to me. I don't know, it's a psychological block. The word cannot pass my throat. I don't know why. Maybe because I wasn't used to do it when I was a baby. I've never seen him before.
Like a child lost, wandering about, touching, feeling, tattered grounds, touching, seeing, wooden boards, etched in ink, etched in weather, etched in fading memories, etched, faded, forgotten. I walk on earth above the bones of a multitude of Golden Mountain men, searching for scraps of memory. Like a child unloved, his face pressed hard against the wet window, peering in. For a desperate moment, I touch my past.
Left my home and my parents at the age of 21. In a family of 8 children, I was the youngest son. Little choice was left to me but to go to a foreign land. Oh, mourn the passing of this wandering Chinaman. I arrived in this country in 1905, a 16-hour day just to try and stay alive. When I saved enough and thought I was doing fine, then came a terrible crash back in 1929.
When I was little, I remember my father taking me to the Hum Family Association on Sundays. My father later co-founded the Jiulun Gongsa in Montreal, which united 3 other family clans. The family association was distinctly North American. It was like a substitute family where the men, the Lowakil, the old overseas Chinese, would meet and talk. I can imagine my father depositing his money every week at the credit union, sitting down to read the Chinese papers, or just chatting with friends. Today I was glad to meet Mr. Hum, a former restaurant worker, one of the Law Rock Hill, who knew my father. Do you remember any stories about my father?
A little bit, you know.
Yeah.
Not exactly very much, you see. But we had to work together quite a long time.
At Jordan Gongsan?
Yeah.
But before that, did you know him socially? Did you...
Your father, no gambling, nothing at all. He's a good man. Save money.
Memories are fading, but also the long hours of work and the social isolation of these men must have made it very difficult for them to get to know each other well. Since my father worked in the laundry, naturally, that's my next step. But I soon discovered many of the laundrymen who knew him during the 1920s, the 30s, and the 40s have passed away. Mr. Chin and his wife run one of the last hand laundries in Montreal. He only came to Canada in the 1950s. His father, like mine, was a head taxpayer and worked in a laundry. After working briefly in Vancouver, my grandfather came to Montreal. He opened a laundry in the East End. When my father arrived in 1921, he got a job as a houseboy. Then he went to work in my grandfather's laundry. They worked together until the 1950s, 6 days a week, 16 hours a day, to pay off the head tax debt and to have enough money to send back to the family. You didn't need much capital to start a laundry, just hard work and the ability to swallow your pride. What little money was needed could be borrowed from the family association. Montreal was the Chinese laundry capital of Canada, with over 400 laundries at one time. Mr. Yi Ao worked in one of these laundries for many years.
2 个礼拜$2 a day. Yeah, work a long time ago. About 1 or 2 hours every night. Then sleep and no good bed sleep. 有時紅啲爽，有時問地海半佢，你哋啊，呢個好艱苦啊。
I met Mr. Yi in the Montreal Chinese Hospital. He arrived in Canada in 1910 at the age of 20. My father helped Mr. Yi write letters home to China. Although he is over 100, he still remembers what paying the head tax meant to him.
500銀水劍，2眼你叫暈晒，你食咩啫？啲過程飲個咖啡啊，唔夠2銀你又，即係樣叫食夢噶咯，將你十個辣可辣柒噶啦，買戲啊冇眼咪啊，要我眼掟啲眼淚，兩個間嗌噶啦，2銀暈晒啊！ 要人攞到無天啊，近乎嘛。你知嘅時候好妙思浪嘅啊，浪嘅呢要點樣解呢？呢隻活人啊，只有個個咧唔准你唔嚴啊，唔准浪嘅啊，海氣啊唔准啊，乜浪嘅垃圾嘅話，連大改來在。จะเลี้ยงฟ้าหนองสันกันล้อเต้าหมูดินอะไรมาก็เลี้ยมยิกกายเนี่ยก่อนหองนี่ก็งุสิมาเดี๋ยวก่อนเลี้ยงมาเดี๋ยวก็กำลังพูดชิวฮีเบี้ยวสีหนองอินน่ะ所以我哋好唔歡啊！
嗰陣時呢，500銀可以買2斤。當然係唔公平嘅。除咗我哋中國人之外呢，冇人要額外扣稅嘅。
The railway is at the heart of Canada's history. The men who built the CPR from the Rockies to the Pacific Ocean were Chinese. They earned 1/3 the wages of the white workers. But once they completed the railway, they were no longer wanted. The head tax was imposed to keep them out of Canada. It began at $50, then raised to $100, and finally $500. The government collected millions, almost enough to cover the $25 million it gave the CPR. Still, the unions, the churches, the politicians, all agitated for Chinese exclusion. I can picture my father taking the train across Canada on his trips back to China. I look for the sites of the Chinese railway camps, the steel tracks they laid, the tunnels they blasted through the mountains. What do I hope to find among the long-lost spirits of the Chinese railway workers? 17,000 Chinese came to build the CPR. Up to 1,500 died in the process. Legend has it, one Chinese worker is buried under each mile of track through the Fraser Canyon.
This is the last train ever. Next week, I must leave by Greyhound. Not that I care. The CPR is not my father. Tracks clicked as I watched the disappearing moon flashing, as signals do before a change of rails. The cool breeze whips by, and every mile I see Chinese workers pitching girders, sometimes solitary, sometimes blood splattered, sweating and singing, while the moon shines a spotlight on them.
A few years ago, when I was looking for a job, I thought it would be nice to get a job with the railway. So I wrote a letter to CP, Canadian Pacific, What I said in this letter was, since my ancestors helped build the CPR out west, I'd like to keep up the tradition by offering my services to you. As it turns out, he invited me in for an interview, gave me a 50-question psychological test, and I was never called back for a second interview, so maybe I flunked my psychological test. Anyway, after that, I decided to get a job with CN, and this is where I am, the People's Railway. Well, I think my father would be quite proud of the fact that I'm an engineer today, and probably working with the railway, because he always thought the railway, because of the whole mystique of the CP, to be a very important aspect of Canadian industry. And so I think he was quite interested in the railway.
Boat Chong sailed away on a liner Sakoshe to his home port far away. He said, when I come back, I bring ye bride. You see a China maiden by my side. Ali know she wait for he every day so patiently. Chong, he come from Hong Kong, where Chinese man play holiday on a drum. Chong, no likey that song, where Chinese man cry way up high, sing sangay, mangay, chicka licka fungay. Chong, go back to Hong Kong. I betcha he teach his China girl how to dance like in a trance. Teachy peachy American song all day long to his China girl in old Hong Kong.
The head tax was not enough. In 1923, Canada shut its doors to all further Chinese immigrants, claiming they could never assimilate into Canadian society. The Chinese Exclusion Act would last 24 years, and its effects would be even more devastating than a head tax. The community could not develop normally. It was full of married bachelors. Many men led lonely, isolated lives. Chinatown started to die. Thousands of men, like James Wing, as well as my father and grandfather, were stranded here without any chance to bring their families.
I feel very bad naturally to leave the wife, but all the Chinese came here with the future, hope of the future. There's employment here, a chance to make a living. In China, it's difficult. So I didn't regret it to come. The only thing is that, well, I have to be just like the older Chinese. I will come to Canada. Maybe after 10 or 15 years, then I would have a chance to go back to see my family. But
how did your wife feel? Did she understand why this was happening to her?
oh, she prepared around. But all the Chinese around my area, overseas Chinese, they all the women had to go through the same kind of life. So she not surprised. She prepared for that.
After the marriage, men like James and Yi Ao had to come back to Canada within 2 years, or they would lose the right to return. My parents married when my father went back to China in 1923. With the passing of the Exclusion Act that year, my father could not bring my mother back to Canada with him.
"於歸夫出外，有口實難開。遨遊異國幾時回？父卻風流經數載。春生灰，家貧無可奈。 寄與同群諸姊妹，出洋子弟勿相配。
For the next 33 years, my mother saw my father only 3 times, whenever he could save the money for a visit home. My mother knew of his life in Canada almost entirely from the letters he sent.
我就記得就是記得日本隊淪陷嘅時，佢就相片去愛，即係話南面你 OK 咯，我哋小氣個諗得啦，邊點未出曬我，南面都依個隊咯，我南面你 OK 咯，兜日本隊咯，我就記得佢咪話佢เป็นของนี้เขาเชื่อพูดแล้วที่เราไอ้ตัวเทมโพแล้วแม่ก็อย่างเขาตัวหัดไม้ก็อย่างตัวแล้วcái con lão em sáng đó, cái thằng lão giàu sáng đó, cái trong nhà em có bé vui đó, cắm eo lộc eo nịnh nó cái tôi vui này thôi đó, vui này đi mọi gì khỏi lắm.
Other regulations followed the Exclusion Act. Chinese were prevented from being citizens. They were denied the right to vote and to join the professions. There were more laws against the Chinese in Canada than any other minority. The Chinese helped build the railway. They helped build this country, but they were not white. The age-old arguments opposing non-white immigration were used against them. Job stealers, people who could not fit in. Still, the Chinese stayed for the same reasons that all immigrants stayed. My father and grandfather made a living here, and they were not going to be pushed out.
From the past experience, we only view Canada. It's not a country called my own. It's a country just so a kind of temporary employer rather than a country of my own.
That was because of the Exclusion Act.
They exclude the Chinese from having a family, and we were not welcome and discriminated. So no sense to claim it's your country and your home. No business will employ a Chinese. See, they don't want to employ you. They look down on you. Another thing is that marriage. Nobody would think to marry Chinese or Chinese think of marrying a Canadian, except your own race. We never think of fighting back or fighting for right because why? Because we knew it would be impossible to win or to get in ahead. So just simply totally accept it and work silently to the best to advantage, that's all. So we didn't have any trying to have a legal battle or trying to criticize the society. We simply accept all those things. Just fate.
How am I feeling? Drinking alone with no sweetheart of my own. Well, frankly, I'm a bit stoned, yes I am. I play a little poker, hey, maybe some dice. Bartender, give me another whiskey and ice. You know, a woman around here sure would be nice, oh yes. This kind of living no kind of life, pushing an iron or a carving knife. Man, I sure would like to see my wife.
World War II was a turning point for the Chinese in Canada. Many Chinese Canadians volunteered to fight for this country. In Vancouver, I met war veterans Ken Lee and George Marr.
We volunteered as a group being attached to the British because they wanted people like us to operate behind the lines because we could speak Chinese and we looked the part, you know, like natives. We could blend into the background. The reason I joined up was because a lot of my friends were being called up. The ones that were called up, they were born here. I don't know of anybody that was not a Canadian that didn't get called up.
Well, they were conscriptists, don't you remember?
Yeah.
And we said, why should we fight for this country when we have no rights?
Yeah.
And so they said that we would fight for the country, they would right all these wrongs.
Yeah.
Which they did.
Yeah.
1947.
Yeah.
Ken arrived in Canada at the age of 6 in 1920 and settled with his family in Dauphin, Manitoba. George was born in Nanaimo, British Columbia. He comes from a merchant family that landed in BC at the turn of the century.
Well, I had my training in Maple Creek, Saskatchewan, and we had a corporal. Well, anywhere else, I think he would have been known as a southern redneck. He didn't like Chinese, and I didn't like him, and we had a couple of battle royals. You know, he took his jacket off, and we had slugged it out behind the huts and stuff like that, you know. But other than that, it was all right, you know.
What did he say to you?
Well, you know how they give you you know, they must be getting at the bottom of the barrel when they let you bastards in here, you know, and stuff like that, you know. So I said, well, you know better than me. I said, the only way to prove it is just get out the back there, you know. So it was nothing new, you know. I mean, when we grew up going to school, it was the same way all the time. You know, you had to fight every day. You know, guys were making wise cracks at you. You know, hey, you pigtail, you rice eater, and this and that, you know. You know, chink and this and that. So you either fought or you died. You know, you just crawled into the woodwork.
Did the both of you feel that you had an impact on the Canadian government?
Well, sure,
Well,
I think
so, yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard to deny you full citizenship after the guys have gone to war for you. You know. I mean, no matter how many of us went or how many of us didn't come back, you know, it's still that we had offered our lives to our country.
Thanks mainly to the Chinese-Canadian war effort, the government repealed the Exclusion Act in 1947. Thousands of men in their 50s, finally got the chance to bring their wives and children to Canada. James Wing was reunited with his family in 1953. In 1951, my father, at last, could become a Canadian citizen. He was then able to bring his family here. My mother and I finally joined him in 1956. She was 51. My father was 53. I was 7 when I came to Canada. It was the first time I had seen my father since I was 10 months old. I still have fond memories of my father taking me down to Chinatown. He was proud to show me off to his friends. Many of them still didn't have families here. They would come running across the street to pat my head or stroke my face. My father was a gentle and stoic man. He accepted hardships like a Chinese peasant, and he overcame them. He struggled all his life to make a living for his family, and he succeeded. I'll always remember him telling me, whatever you do in this life, make a contribution. I was lucky when I came. I was young enough to go to school. My brother David arrived in Canada in 1950. He was 14. It was hard when he first came. There was no other opportunity but to do laundry work.
Nó我就當唔到啊嘛，放學一放學翻嚟都咯，4點放學翻嚟意思話我又買嘢多呀，買糧水呀，一翻嚟要烘嘢咯，要煮飯咧。
我想你煮飯？
唔係我煮飯我用嘢，你到我成4點鐘我收工我去 study 講我唔喺食肉翅啊。
我冇時間6時，冇時間。
佢到我4點晚黑啲，我去 study 啦，我咪叫嘢。啊，到我係我偷就 study 咪好。
唔係你有做嗰陣時，你自己你生來唔來？
我係中意來，係。
你中意來
Yeah, I dream here. It's a paradise. But it's good. I happy here.
My whole family was reunited when my sisters came in the 60s. One of them went to Edmonton, and the other two joined us in Montreal.
做兩位啊，多時經驗嚟攞佢啲學，佢啲攞飯咧，依家喺你啲行業嘅行過，佢都望住你清㗎。
你入啊？
你入佢啊？
你試過你？
唔係嘛？
我日都試過咯，我坐搬來練到自然試過。那攞飯多呀，13、14呀，嗰啲。ini slut yang ni lok slut dah, ini slut yang ni jaga sel ni lah, dan nam lại ni slut po yang nó thong món na, cái chai đi, có sel người đó.
Có lựa cây nó hồ nghìn nó lựa ho chứ ho ta gì có lựa miệng kinh có ai biết lựa cây này nó hồ nghìn có.
Excuse me, yeah. You mind if I ask you a personal question? No. What is it? Where are you from? I'm from Toronto. No, maybe you misunderstand me. Where are you from? Well, where did you learn to speak English so good? Huh. Well, the truth be known, I don't speak English very good. I speak it very well. Hey, yeah, you know karate? Charlie, you know, we were just discussing it, and perhaps you could help us. We were wondering, why is it so many of our little Oriental friends seem to suffer from myopia, nearsightedness? Well, my personal belief is that it's hereditary. You see, we were straining our eyes 2,000 years ago, writing poetry and essays on philosophy by candlelight. About the same time, your ancestors were resisting Roman attempts to introduce the practice of daily bathing in the Phoenician alphabet.
Jessica, this is the laundry here, see? Uh-huh. I came here with your granny when I was about your age, when I was about 7 years old. And it was your grandfather, your grandmother, and myself, all three of us were living here. And we didn't even have a bedroom, so we slept in the middle of the laundry. And it was very hard work for your grandparents. You know how it's not too much fun for your mommy and I to do the laundry, eh? But imagine your grandparents were washing other people's dirty clothes every day. And there's, across the street there used to be the old shoemaker. And over there was the old barber shop. and I would go across there to get my haircut.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd get our shoes repaired here, and they would bring the laundry here, and my father would wash the laundry. So it was a very interesting neighborhood at that time.
My daughter Jessica is half Chinese. She has no problem with her non-Chinese side, but I want her to be as comfortable with her Chinese half. She was only 10 months old when my father died.
You see this little hole here?
Yeah.
You know what we used to do?
What?
I used to make dynamite.
How?
With sulfur, saltpeter, and charcoal.
Oh.
And we would pack it into this little hole, and we would light it, and the whole thing would just blow up. That's what happened to this thing. I was your age, Jessica. I was 7 when I came here.
I'm not 7.
Yeah.
I'm almost 9.
You're almost 9.
I grew up in the back of my father's laundry in Verdun, a working-class section of Montreal. I tried my best to blend in with the other kids, but living in a laundry was a different experience. I still remember the smell of bleach and starch. In the winter, I always enjoy wash night. Tuesdays and Thursdays, there would be steam rising from the hot water used to wash the clothes, and warmth from the pot-belly stove used to dry the laundry. My father didn't want me to do any manual work in the laundry. Like most immigrant fathers, he wanted me to study. But there was always one chore I had to do. He hoped I would learn some Chinese characters by writing the laundry tickets.
Mr. Wu works in the laundry and his wife sews in the shop, and each and every wrinkle tells a tale. A survivor of the hard times and a fighter all his life, but the twinkle in his eye has never failed. He puts a kettle on the table and he leans against the wall. He says, "Excuse my English," but his words speak for us all. He says, "These hands have washed the clothes. These hands have served the food, heaven knows. This neck is felt to mob's rope, and it's been behind barbed wire. This back is laid railroad track, these arms have been for hire. These hands have fought injustice, and this soul has been on fire. Hey, but I'm still here, and going strong, and getting tired of proving I belong. I'm still here and going strong, and getting tired of proving I belong."
Cái bạc bạc nó mù mù ha.
Daddy.
Ông cô cho tôi lo người không phải đi hồi nào còn nó. Ngồi chỗ cái sang một thay hôn nên mình nào còn nó mình ok dầm miệng nhiều mà ok nó hiện ra nhiều hố lại nó cần ra nó hố lại nó. Cho nên máu cái hàng con nó mà giờ kia coi soi coi chứ không con là coi sao nó không mà với thải cái sang một nó còn nó. Nó quý hồ lộ thủ đoạn mà theo và ngôi cha phụ sẵn thì sẽ gì lăng cô mà hô mất con đẩy lội coi ra họ muốn bà báo đó mà muốn ngồi hay đẩy lội con đó cô cha khỏi đấy nói cả lăng rồi họ như lũ họ con to. Cái lăng nè cái sẽ siêu tiền phu luôn cô kẹt hậu lăng người ta lấy liệu lấy hút và คนนี้ก็ห้องชงนี่นั่นก็เกี่ยวเหล้ามานี่แทงแกก็นี่หึงhay không mà lăng gọi này trên lăng thu hạt cái điนี่ใครก็ชี้ก็จ้าก็ห้องเล้าจ้าก็จะซิ้วแต่ฮิตอะไรอิ่มมาเคยว่าตากังใช่ไหมเคยว่าตากังตาก็ชิมโตเลยโตแต่หม้อไหนเนี่ยทั้งก็ห้องเล้าก็ชงมาnó hít quaนี่แกมาจังสิบเอาปองก็โยบัน
ไม่ได้叫事，你話開政府你咪人攞款我而講到，你叫爸爸唔知，你有乜可以講爸爸，有冇可以講嘅？
佢mất tầm lệ, ai có tu hon gì con à, lại bay ở chỗ tại cái à, mai đi phó xe tại khó rồi, cái đại học Léo Thành cái tròn chảo to lên mà nghiêm cà phê theo mình bao đó, khi em chống ở xe há, làm em làm khi em đấy thì giờ nghiêm mới cà phê giờ tại chỗ phải mình bao, hay khó xong rồi đó lo, thì Léo Thành phần đó.
It was difficult for my mother coming to a foreign land at the age of 51 and getting to know my father all over again. After all these years, it was like a meeting of strangers. For my father, laundry work was a living. He was content with it. But for my mother, there was no future for herself or her children. She got a second job in a hat factory and managed to save enough money to buy a house. She kept the family together in a more emotional and spiritual sense. The effects of the Exclusion Act continue today in the lives of these modern-day Gold Mountain widows.
先生咧有冇掛住你哋先生啊？有冇諗下佢哋喺加拿大啲生活？
他有冇發啲啊？
接眼幾份嚟到，冇眼幾份嚟望眼。
冇睇咪就去讀幾去讀咯，佢就唔係見10幾年咁，我估乜啦，我估來啦，後到呢幾日忽然間就講話真啊嘛來講，為3隻了佢啫，我都冇啊。個anh kia bảo, hey, khui quả sĩ vẫn là hú của lần quay nhận lưỡi là có.
Không ai dùng hình hú lại mà cũng chỉ lo chẳng mấy cái đó. Người ta có chẳng có dòng lưỡi lo quá. Hú này cháu thua mà có cái sẵn cái cảm đức, chân như thua nãy để thua, chân hồi nãy lẩu.
Quên một cám con mà, một cám con ở trên phu à. Quên và phía khoan đi con mà, đại cầm tôi cũng lan để ăn cơ nỉ sắc đó lô hổ à.
Với mẹ hồng gì tôi cái xìm đầy mình sao hồng mình có phun ngại la chẳng có cuối lai sập bạc muốn nó lại tài sập ini lai đi cái mà yêu lại sai tên lại tài khám đi lai có và còn là tài mua không sai lắm rồi vẫn tiền cái vàng ở mà người không lai người sinh ra lần đầu rồi đi lại nó sai xí bên đó niệm sai cả niệm sai quay sai ra không
cái lỗ ban điểm nó nào này
vậy thì nó phải mình hi phương đi
cái mi đấy
chăm hồng nhìn được và sai xí bên rồi đó còn chỉ nghe cái than đi xí
cái ông người chính người học cái chính đồ yểm sức này đồ á đi đồ cái yểm sức chứ sao đồ đi yểm sức chứ cái đồ cái yểm sức
sắp cái đồ rồi tao
mà nó chân có nghề ní cái hay phụ lo chân cái cái
tiệc rồi cô hay tăng vậy
tưởng chỉ cái à
cô dùng sức là con vào nó cho xí nó yêu khí xin đi chống thực nó chống thực khí xin nó dùng hiếu con vào
hiếu con nó không nghe chút nè
我話佢話劍散都學佢上喎，我基本可能佢幾隻口文可唔知係佢刀咯，佢都唔學佢，啲係幾錢間嚟都唔揾，但係成日我同多嘢都佢太靚啦。
At the beginning, I was looking for my father's story. I was trying to understand what he went through, what the men went through. After talking with my mother and her friends, I started to understand the women's side of the story. I thought life was hard for them back in China without their husbands. It was hard, but it was a much easier life compared to what they faced in Canada. They spent their youth separated from their husbands. Now that their husbands are gone, they seek support from each other, still fighting for a sense of self-identity and independence. I can talk about these things with my mother now, and to look more closely into my parents' relationship. I'm more sensitive to my mother's experience, and I can see that my mother is a very strong woman.
Nè cả anh còn lòi à? Sẽ còn lòi. Yêu cả mà. Hả? Mồi ăn. Để khỏi chuyện này lo lấy, có người mong mất cô rồi, để có coi cái ca hình xong rồi, yêu ho, trong sai cài, không mà ho lo, coi ho yêu người đó, bởi khen bao nhiêu, lại coi lại bay từ lối mai nó như là ngồi, cái thường cái mi, tôi yêu xin mama, có một tao làm nó ô tê cái xe ngay đó.
It took a trip to China and visiting Canada's Chinatowns for me to appreciate that Chinese people are social beings. We define ourselves by our social context, our families, our community, our villages. Chinatown is my village. It has changed a lot since my father's time, but I still feel good coming down here. I enjoy the feeling of blending in. This is where I can be myself.
Fresh rock cut, pleasant smile. Roast pork, fresh, hot. Taste before you buy. Guaranteed to satisfy. Ginger, green onions, soy sauce, MSG. Take a break. Cross the street. Find a booth. Order green tea. Relax. Where else would you possibly want to be?
4, 5, 6, 7, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let go. Action. Stop. Thinking. Jump. Build. Stop.
My nephew Eddie is a CBC, Canadian-born Chinese. I wanted to know how the younger members of our family feel about the past, if he knew much about his grandfather.
Not much. I wasn't even born then. When
So how do you feel about the fact that when you first came, you had to pay $500 to get to Canada?
the head tax, I find it really the race discrimination, because I just recently read on the Japanese Canadians, how they were being mistreated in the Vancouver. I would like to know why it came upon, why. I know that I'm not too sure about the information, but was it, I was wondering if there were my great-grandmother was separated from my great-grandfather for over a period of time because they weren't allowed Oriental women, Chinese women to immigrate in Canada. When I was younger, sure, I was treated as a yellow nigger. They used to call me yellow nigger. They used to call me Ching, Ching, go back to your country. I felt bad. I tell you the truth, and once they said that, it made fun of me. I actually cried when I was younger, but not anymore. We're people, and we're just as white or black as other people. We're just different. know, it's basically the same.
A few years after the death of his first wife, James Wing marries Imelda Moran in 1983.
My family accepted very good. They accepted right away, and they invite, when they know I met Jimmy, they invite him at home, and they receive him home very good. But the worst thing was the friend. No one they can accept, can marry a Chinese man, because it's not the same tradition. We have nothing the same. He says, you get married for how long? Les premiers mois, c'était pas toujours facile, hein? Mais maintenant, on a l'impression que on a vécu comme ça toute notre vie.
And so it was after that meeting that they decided to go ahead with this rally because they feel that they have enough support.
The rally will be in Ottawa.
We'll be in Ottawa on May 18th.
May 18th.
Yeah, it's a Monday, Victoria Day Monday. Well, we had thought about July 1st, but then we felt there might be too much backlash, you know, that would be an unpatriotic protesting on July 1st.
We can't afford that.
Yeah, and so we decided on Victoria Day.
So this rally is a national rally, like for people from coming from different parts, or just?
Well, I think what's going to happen is mainly Toronto, Montreal, and Ottawa.
Toronto, Montreal.
And Vancouver will organize their own rally in support out in Vancouver. So it will be essentially a national rally. It was a big step for our community to go to Ottawa. For the first time, more than 400 head taxpayers and their supporters marched on Parliament Hill to demand justice.
When do we want it? Now! What do we want? When do we want it? Now!
Chinese Canadians have won the right to full participation in this country. The 62 years of government racism against the Chinese is a part of Canadian history. By denying us redress, the government is denying our history.
In those days, the Chinese immigrants had no right to bring their families into the country. They had no right to apply for naturalization. All these unfair immigration laws were applied to the Chinese only. However, the Canadian government will come and give assistance to all the nationalities.
Is it fair that these contributors, the ones who helped bring Canada closer together with the railway, were not allowed to have families join them?
Un acte d'exclusion qui a résulté dans la séparation forcée et prolongée, et cruellement prolongée de leur famille.
The redress campaign is educating and uniting Chinese Canadians of all generations. Over $23 million were collected in head tax. The 1,000 or so surviving head taxpayers want the symbolic return of that amount. They're demanding this money be paid back to the individuals and for community development. The money won't erase the pain, but it will say that Canada must never profit from racism again.
Ces Chinois-là en ont souffert durant des générations de ça. Puis ceux qui pensent qu'on va oublier tout le mal qu'on a fait, qui vont avoir la conscience tranquille, je ne sais pas comment ils peuvent faire. C'est pas possible d'avoir la conscience tranquille et dire, bon, on vous a fait du mal, mais là, tout le monde l'oublie. Oubliez ça.
We
first came across the sea to this land to be free, and we made the sacrifice when you made us pay the price. Now the time is good and right, no more hype and stereotype. Now we want what is our dues. We want redress for the head tax blues. We want redress for the head tax blues. For there ain't no gold like we were told, working every day hard till we get old, working for the children to keep them alive, working every day hard just to survive. Now the time is good and right, no more hype and stereotype. Now we want what is our dues. We want redress for the head tax blues. We want redress for the head tax blues.
Mà ngoài của Trung Quốc và sĩ đê là ngô và những bằng hành hai cầm loại mà công phải nú ở Trung Quốc rồi sẽ cái niệm miệng bò mà bố nó người nào xui muốn nó bằng hành ai muốn ở Trung Quốc tâm công phải hai cầm này lắm.
Just as an anecdote of how impatient we've gotten, I'm in the process now of making a documentary film on the effects of the head tax and the Exclusion Act on members of the Chinese Canadian community. And a month ago, we interviewed a 100-year-old gentleman who paid the head tax when he first came into Canada. And we did an interview with him, and he was sitting there, very emotional, saying that I would like to have justice done for me before I die. And last week, we were going to go back and follow up on that interview, and we found that he had died about a week and a half ago. Mr. Yi Ao, like thousands of other head taxpayers, never saw justice. Neither did my grandfather. He passed away in 1966. He was never united with his wife. In his later years, his greatest happiness was being with his grand and great-grandchildren. I found out he was a well-respected scholar in the community. He was a teacher at the YMCI. He must have taught my father well. My father had a well-kept secret that no one in the family knew until now. He wrote poems and had them published in journals in Hong Kong. Imagine, after a long day's work, he must have sat at the ironing table, writing down his feelings in the classical, poetic style. Through these poems, I'm beginning to touch my father's spirit.
Xôi ngột cha vò thiêu phục thiêu yên yên buông quả hắc trung liều thong sóng sai lù đập bình hàn cam liều ông nhìn sang chi kỳ thiêu phong kinh不息的人已卖了湘江发水湖南橋同慶日舉上五岸，破浪乘風萬里遙。
Every year, my family, Hang San, will walk the mountain. For the last few years, this ritual has greater significance for me. Today, my father and grandfather enjoy the love and care of their family.
Okay, fella. Let's go, Paul. Fella. 3 times. Fella. Come on, Ashley. Hey, come on. Ashley and Michael first. Okay, like that. Go, Paul. 3 times, okay?
Okay.
1, 2, 3, yeah. Come on. Okay, next, James' turn. James and Jessica. James and Jessica. Put James on the floor.
Okay.
Very good. Này gì tiền đề á, tại này gì mọi đề mà. Ý kêu lục bản nén à. Ý kêu lục bản nén. Dạ. Dạ, cái chút sẽ 182啊。182個要6百。
My father was as Canadian as he was Chinese. His whole adulthood was shaped by Canada. He didn't talk about going back to China, being buried in China, like some of the older generation. This was his home. But he would also say to me, well, you know you're Chinese, so don't be too disappointed if things don't work out, because that's the way it is here. He accepted Canada as his country, but he always felt that Canada never accepted him. My father was a Canadian in a Chinese way. He was a Chinese Canadian. The Lowakil have not spoken much about the past because it was painful, and they don't want to live those days again. The sons and daughters did not ask about the past until now. We're now confident and strong enough to confront our history. My daughter Jessica is the 4th generation of our family in Canada. No matter how hard the government tried, it was not able to break our family's continuity. Almost a century ago, her great-grandfather had the hope of building a better life for his children in this country. The strength of my father, my mother, and grandfather, and thousands of others allowed us to survive the hardships and won us the right to be Canadians. In making this film, I've rediscovered that strength, and I want to pass that strength on to Jessica.
There's a very old legend in China of an old man who decided to move a mountain. It seems he woke up one day and discovered that a mountain's shadow was covering his garden. So after he had his breakfast, he took a pail and a shovel, went to the top of the mountain, shoveled some of the dirt into the pail, walked down the side of the mountain, over to the other side about 500 yards, and dumped out the pail. He kept this up all day. After a couple of days, another man was walking by and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I'm moving this mountain." Ha! You couldn't possibly move this mountain. And the old man put down his shovel for a moment and he said, "Well, if I don't finish this job, my children will work on it and perhaps they'll finish it. And if they can't finish it, their children will try to work on it and finish it. And as big as this mountain is, it can't get any bigger. And eventually, we will move this mountain."